Micajah, Big Harp. Born Joshua Harper, before 1768, probably, c. 1748, August 1799, and Wiley, Little Harp. Born William Harper, before 1770, probably, c. 1750, February 8, 1804, were serial killers, murderers, highwaymen, and river pirates, who operated in Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, and Mississippi. In the late 18th century, the Harpes' crimes appear to have been motivated more by bloodlust than financial gain. They are most likely the United States' first known serial killers, reckoned from the colonial era forward. The Harpe brothers are credited with having killed 39 people, and may have killed as many as 50. Early life. It is difficult to differentiate the facts about the Harpe brothers from the later legends of their exploits. The Harpes were born in Orange County, North Carolina, to Scottish parents. Prior to the American Revolution, their fathers may also have been North Carolina regulators, involved in the War of the Regulation or Regulator War. This occurred between 1765 and 1771, opposing the continuing royal government interference by colonial officials in the province of North Carolina. During the American Revolutionary War, the Harpes' fathers tried to join the Patriot American forces but were refused because of their earlier associations with British loyalists. Big Harp later traveled in the company of two women, Susan and Betty Roberts, possibly sisters, both of whom bore him children. Around April or May 1775, the young Harper cousins left North Carolina and went to Virginia to find overseer jobs on a slave plantation. A painting of Loyalist and Patriot militia fighting each other at the Battle of Kings Mountain. The Harpe brothers, with their irregular Tory outlaw gang and other Loyalist militia, fought under the command of British Major Patrick Ferguson and were seen in 1780 at Kings Mountain, North Carolina by Frank Wood, a patriot over Mountain Man, and older brother of future Harpe captive Susan Wood. During the 3-hour engagement, Wood took aim at Big Harp but missed his target. Involvement in the American Revolutionary War and Indian Wars. Little is known of the Harpes' whereabouts at the outbreak of the American Revolution. According to the eyewitness account of Captain James Wood, they joined a Tory rape gang in North Carolina. These gangs took advantage of the war by raping, stealing, murdering, and burning and destroying property, especially farms of Patriot colonists. The Harpes' gang took part in the kidnapping of 3 teenage girls, with a 4th girl being rescued by Captain Wood. Captain Wood's son was Patriot soldier Frank Wood, who was the older brother of Susan Wood Harpe, later kidnapped and married by Micajah, Big Harp. Frank Wood claimed to have seen the Harpe brothers serving, loosely, as Tory militia, at the Battle of Kings Mountain in October 1780, under British commander Major Patrick Ferguson. Later, the Harpes served under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Banastre Tarleton's British Legion, at the battles of Blackstocks in November 1780 and Cowpens in January 1781. Following the decisive British defeat by Patriot French forces at Yorktown in 1781, the Harpes left North Carolina, dispersing with their Indian allies, the Chickamauga Cherokees, to Tennessee villages west of the Appalachian Mountains. On April 2, 1781, they joined war parties of 400 Chickamauga to attack the Patriot frontier settlement of Bluff Station at Fort Nashboro, now Nashville, Tennessee, which would be assaulted by them again on either July 20, 1788, or April 9, 1793. On August 19, 1782, the Harpes accompanied a British-backed Chickamauga Cherokee war party to Kentucky at the Battle of Blue Licks, where they helped to defeat an army of Patriot frontiersmen led by Daniel Boone. During the Harpe brothers' early frontier period, among the Chickamauga Cherokee, They lived in the village of Micajah, near Chattanooga, Tennessee, for approximately 12 or 13 years. During this time, they kidnapped Maria Davidson and later Susan Wood and made them their women. In 1794, the Harpes and their women abandoned their Indian habitation before Micajah was destroyed in a raid by American settlers. The Harpe Brothers would later relocate to Powell's Valley, around Knoxville, Tennessee, where they stole food and supplies from local pioneers. The whereabouts of the Harpes are unknown between the summer of 1795 and spring of 1797. But by spring they were dwelling in a cabin on Beavers Creek near Knoxville. The Harpes may have disguised their Tory past from their Patriot neighbors by changing their original name of Harper, which was a common Loyalist name in Revolutionary War-era North Carolina. On June 1, 1797, Wiley Harpe married Sarah Rice, which was recorded in the Knox County, Tennessee marriage records. Sometime during 1797, the Harpes would begin their trail of death in Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois. In 1799, the Harpe brothers were captured, held for trial, and broke out of the Kentucky State Jail in Danville, the first state capital, before they could be sentenced to death by hanging for their murderous crimes. This historical reconstruction of the jail, where Micajah and Wiley Harpe were briefly incarcerated, was originally built by Isaac Hyde as a log prison structure, having a central breezeway between two windowed prison cells, with a dirt floor and stone chimney on one side. In 1799, near Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, the world's longest cave was the scene of a horrific murder, when the Harpes killed a young black man by slamming his head against a tree. The old path of the Natchez Trace, where, between 1799 and 1803, Wiley Little Harpe, following the death of his brother Micajah Big Harpe, joined Peter Alston, son of the counterfeiter Philip Alston, and the Samuel Mason gang, committing highway robbery and murder against helpless and unsuspecting travelers, reported as crimes committed by Mason of the Woods. Atrocities and serial murders. The Harpes confessed to the killing of a confirmed 39 people, but the estimated combined total, including unknown victims, may number more than 50. What follows are the accounts of a few of the murders the two committed. In 1797, the Harpes were living near Knoxville, Tennessee. They were driven from the town after being charged with stealing hogs and horses. They were also accused of murdering a man named Johnson, whose body was found in a river, covered in urine and ripped open, with the chest cavity filled and weighted down with stones. This became a regular corpse disposal method and signature characteristic of the Harpes' serial killings. They butchered anyone at the slightest provocation, even babies. From Knoxville, the Harpes fled north into Kentucky. They entered the state on the Wilderness Road near the Cumberland Gap. They are believed to have murdered a peddler named Peyton, taking his horse and some of his goods. In December, they murdered 2 travelers from Maryland. Next, a man named John Langford, who was traveling from Virginia to Kentucky, turned up dead, and a local innkeeper pointed the authorities to the Harpes. The criminal pair was pursued, captured, and jailed in Danville, Kentucky, but they managed to escape. When a posse was sent after them, the young son of a man who assisted the authorities was found dead and mutilated in retaliation by the Harpes. On April 22, 1799, Kentucky Governor James Garrett placed a $300 reward on each of the Harpes' heads. Fleeing northward, the Harpes killed 2 men named Edmonton and Stump. When they were near the mouth of the Saline River in southern Illinois, they came upon 3 men encamped there and killed them. The pair then made their way to Cave in the Rock in southern Illinois, a stronghold of the river pirate and criminal gang leader Samuel Mason. A posse had been aggressively pursuing them, but stopped just short of the cave on the opposite shore in Kentucky. with their wives and 3 children in tow. The Harpes holed up with the Samuel Mason gang, who preyed on slow-moving flatboats making their way along the Ohio River. While the Mason gang could be ruthless, even they were appalled at the actions of the Harpes. After the murderous pair began to make a habit of taking travelers to the top of the bluff, stripping them naked, and throwing them off, the Mason gang forced the Harpe brothers to leave. The Harpes then returned to eastern Tennessee, where they continued their vicious murder spree. They killed a farmer named Bradbury, a man named Hardin, and a boy named Coffee in July 1798. Soon more bodies were discovered, including those of William Ballard, who had been disemboweled and thrown in the Holton River, James Brassel, who had his throat viciously slashed and was discovered on Brassel's Knob, and John Tully. John Graves and his teenage son were found dead with their heads axed in south-central Kentucky. In Logan County, the Harpes killed a little girl, a young slave, and an entire family they found asleep in their camp. In August, a few miles northeast of Russellville, Kentucky, Big Harp bashed his infant daughter's head against a tree because her constant crying annoyed him, the only crime for which he would later confess genuine remorse. That same month, a man named Trowbridge was found disemboweled in Highland Creek, when the Harpes were given shelter at the Stegall home in Webster County. The pair killed an overnight guest named Major William Love, as well as Mrs. Moses Stegall's 4-month-old baby boy, whose throat was slit when he cried. When Mrs. Stegall screamed at the sight of her infant being killed, she was also murdered. Deaths. The Harpe killings continued in July 1799 as the two fled west to avoid a new posse, organized by John Leeper, which include the avenging husband and father Moses Stegall. Wiley Harpe successfully escaped the confrontation and rejoined the Mason gang pirates at Cave in the Rock. 4 years later, Wiley Harpe may have been captured, along with the rest of the Mason gang, but went unrecognized because he was using the alias of John Sutton, or John Sutton. Both Harpe and Samuel Mason, the gang leader, escaped, but Mason was shot. Afterwards, Little Harpe and another gang member, Peter Alston, who went by the name James May, tried to claim the reward for Samuel Mason, although it is unclear whether Mason had died from the wounds sustained during the escape or whether Harpe had killed him. Either way, as they presented the head, Harpe and Alston were recognized as outlaws themselves and arrested. The two soon escaped but were quickly recaptured, tried, and sentenced to be hanged. In January 1804, Wiley Harpe and Peter Alston were executed. Their heads were cut off and placed high on stakes along the Natchez Trace as a warning to other outlaws. Harp Women. According to John Musgrave, the Harp women, after being freed from cohabitation with the Bros, led relatively respectable and normal lives. Upon the death of Micajah, Big Harp in Kentucky, the women were apprehended and taken to the Russellville, Kentucky State Courthouse but later released. Sally Rice Harpe went back to Knoxville, Tennessee, to live in her father's house. For a time, Susan Wood Harpe and Maria Davidson, aka Betsy Roberts, lived in Russellville. Susan Wood remarried later, and died in Tennessee. Her daughter went to Texas. Popular culture. The Harpe brothers were the inspiration for Big and Little Drum and Lois McMaster Bujold's Sharing Knife Passage. In 2015, the investigation Discovery series Evil Kin aired an episode about the Harpe brothers called Something Wicked in the Woods. Quote, in the 1941 film, The Devil and Daniel Webster, or All That Money Can Buy, Big and Little Harpe are part of the jury of the damned that Daniel must convince in order to free Jabez Stone.